Hello and welcome to Beyond Top 10 Tennis. My name is Dr. Ashley Morgan Berge and I'm your host. I am the author of 11 books, a CEO of 12 years, the founder of a startup set on data privacy, most importantly an elite performance coach with over 18 years, having worked with athletes throughout Europe, the United States to Australia, and most excitingly, I am the world's leading scientist on coach and athlete performance, specifically behind how to develop a top 10 tennis ranking. My work includes everything from mitigating injuries to conditioning behaviors that set a player up long term for the long game towards a top 10 tennis ranking. I'm behind theories from the optimal performance theory, optimal behavior for optimal performance, the barrier breaker, the rule of transference to the golden rule. As has become custom, each episode we dive into one of my books to share additional insights and dig a little deeper. We've been focusing on the secrets to optimal coaching success, the role of experience, optimal performance practices and outcomes in the real world, with well over now 50 episodes to date. Today's topic plays its own role, like so many other episodes, in developing the player, parent to coach for that road ahead towards a top 10 tennis ranking. So as always, buckle in and enjoy the ride. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Can you believe it that we are already at 58 episodes? I am so excited because we are now mere weeks away, maybe a little less, of the 8th key being released. And I think today I'm going to give a few additional insights, essentially because I've been, let's say, fine-tuning, giving a bit of grace, I suppose, to just the book overall before it is released. And I have spent all day so far up until this point doing so. So I have been quite entrenched with it, which means, I guess, for you guys, I'm full of all the good snippets right here and now, and just reading through it. And certain parts, it does make me really excited, looking forward to it. And I think I'm really happy to share that the title is actually, I don't think it's going to be a surprise. However, it is probably the most clear, concise, succinct, and explicit title of all of my books to date. And if you have been following Beyond Top 10 Tennis for some time now, I guarantee you have heard me share the title on a number of occasions. And by that I mean each and every episode. It is that cool in the best possible way. And it really is explicit in how to develop a top 10 tennis ranking. That's right. It's embedded with so much more, and following the central title is the power of the 8th key. And I'm really excited to share that because the power really underscores each and every element. Because we've touched on the 7 keys to optimize your life, which, even though it shared those initial foundations to develop that top 10 tennis ranking, it did not say that. You really had to dig deeper, because by design, that was the intention. If you were given everything on a platter, so to speak, essentially it goes against the data. And now this latest book actually unravels that and explains it even more. So I take the time to share the why, which is really important, because there is a reason why, obviously backed by science, why it just wasn't, here you go, in a manner of speaking. Because as individuals, and again, that humanized approach we touch on each and every episode, it is something I'm so conscious of. And again, the data has really underscored this, and it's like amplifies it. And as that researcher / scientist, it's so important to respect the data and adhere to that because of ethical standards. And as that scientist, obviously doing otherwise would be a contradiction to all the work that's being put in. And if you're new, then you know that this has been around for over 20 years now, and 11 of those past years have been set on uncovering this. And then the past 8 years, which now coincides with the 8th key, which is really cool. It was not planned. It just came about, and it just hit me like a ton of bricks in the best possible way. That, oh my goodness, look at this time frame. Look at this lapse. It's almost like a longitudinal analysis in and of itself. I will promise try not to get too scientific in that respect. But the extensiveness of this, it's so exciting. And obviously the secrets to optimal coaching success plays an absolutely pivotal role to get there. So centering back on today's topic, it's really looking at the stepping stones and the foundations that you need. Because if the 8th key was just given to you now, and if you were not familiar with the secrets to optimal performance success, the secrets to optimal coaching success, the What Is Your Game Missing series, the Science of Elite Performance, it would not make sense. Not in the deep and meaningful way it's intended. If it made sense, I think, on a surface level, that's great. But because you have not done the prior work leading up to that, the outcome of a top 10 tennis ranking, it's not guaranteed. It is not. It's a potential, but because you haven't done the work involved, because you have not implemented those key steps along those initial 10 years of play, and then the second 10 years of play, which obviously we've touched on in I'm Your Tennis Coaching Guru, that that top 10 endpoint, it's a really big maybe, which means to give yourself the best chance of ascending towards the top 10, progressing towards a top 10 tennis ranking. This is it. It's here and now. And something I think I'm really passionate about, and I do make an effort to explain in this release, is why. Why now, and why not 8 years ago? Why was this not the first book that was published? And there's quite let's say, a substantial story behind that. But part of that, without oversharing, is that there's a very big misconception / lack of understanding around the sciences of quantitative and qualitative data. Quantitatively, those of that are familiar, we have over 150,000 inferences, which is absolutely substantial. That underscores this body of work. And I'm really proud to be able to share that, because it has been a tireless 11 plus years investigating this and uncovering this, and incredibly extensive. Though from the qualitative side, it is so powerful, and it packs a punch. And the reason why the quantitative data has been shared until this point was really to set the scene, but also to, in a manner of speaking, give the quantitative data that most people are familiar with. Unfortunately, the qualitative levels are not given, I think, as much merit in the best possible way of how powerful they really are, which is very disheartening from a scientific standpoint, because when you merge both qualitative and quantitative together, you get the best of both worlds, which means from a scientific standpoint, you're amplifying your endpoint. So again, those of you who are not familiar, this body of work has both, which means we use qualitative and quantitative to really amplify, to run this home, to make sure this is it, to make sure this landmark finding, this world of first, really was the case. So the level of scientific robustness is absolute in the best possible way. However, the eighth key finally shares the qualitative side. And the reason behind that, again, it's shared in this book. This is release that's coming, very exciting, is unfortunately because of the prejudice that I've experienced over the years. I want to say at least over the last good almost 20 years, probably in this respect. And that has also come from a young female, from a young woman's perspective in the coaching landscape. And 20 years ago, it really was a man's world. And even now, that's still unfortunately the case. And by all accounts, everyone's going to have different opinions, perspectives. So I'm just sharing a personal recount here. And still trying to be able to share how to develop a top 10 tennis ranking and to help mitigate injuries, and working with players who have male coaches, and they can be female as well, and not open-minded to want to know how. And that is where they're being left behind. But it's more so what concerns me are the players, those athletes, that beyond top 10 tennis is here for you, because you do not need to be left behind. If you are a coach out there, please, irrespective if you're a man or woman, irrespective of who and or how you identify, I really do encourage you to be open-minded, because we know, with obviously the backing of science, the endpoint now, we have that pathway, which is incredibly exciting. And I have spent a significant part of the last 20 years trying my best to have these discussions with coaches around the world, so Australia, North America, throughout Europe, to share, I guess, the underpinnings of all of this. And sadly, a lot of this work actually ended up in the best possible way as publications, because I was unfortunately never given the platform, even with my qualifications and skill sets, which again is touched on in this release, without, I think, oversharing, over elaborating, that unfortunately there have been a lot of players over the years who have missed out, who have not been privy to this, simply because we term them, and I think as you can call them, bottlenecks, gatekeepers, roadblocks, anything else, all of the above. And unfortunately, this is typically from men who are older than me. However, it also did happen from, I have experienced it from women as well, though they have been in the minority. Granted that female coaches are still in the minority within the coaching landscape, more specifically in tennis. I won't comment obviously on other sports, and because I don't have obviously those statistics on hand. Though the irrespective, I think, of that experience, it's worked out in the best possible way, because it means that irrespective of those gatekeepers, male, female, irrespective of different age gaps, etc., this breadth of work is here for you, which means if you are that player out there wanting to ascend towards the top 10, here you go. If you're a top 10 player, irrespective of your current coach, this is here to serve you, to amplify your performance, to keep you inside the top 10. But most excitingly, if you have not won your first Grand Slam, this underscores how to win your first Grand Slam. It is that incredible in the best possible way. If you have already won a Grand Slam or 2 or 3, this puts you on the pathway to continue doing so, to make sure you do not lapse, in a manner of speaking, to keep you ahead of the pack. By all accounts, you can say, I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing because it's working for me, and that is okay. If I was in your shoes, I can completely understand that. But you know what? Your competitors who are also inside the top 10, and if they are privy to the 8th key now and the 7 keys, they are progressing closer and closer to meet your level of play. Which means if you are not prepared with these 8 keys now, or the 8th key is coming in time for Christmas, I promise. If you are not prepared, then be prepared to be displaced, be prepared to be overtaken. And that is a substantial part of what this latest text uncovers, that there is a reason why. And keep in mind, this is statistically significant, so this is not opinionated or from a subjective standpoint. So we know why multiple players every season pop in and out of the top 10, and why certain players stay. And there's a really key ingredient, if you see what I did there. And the 7 keys that you are hopefully aware of now have been designed as such in the best possible way, as a point of recall to know that there are 7. So the 8th builds on top of that. And I have touched on in previous episodes that remember the 7 keys to optimize your life. So that was my latest scientific text that came out at the end of 2021. So almost 2 years ago. So this book essentially has been 2 years in the making in this respect. So it will be coming out around a similar time frame. It's so important to acknowledge that was a complete text. Now, the 8th key, how to develop a top 10 tennis ranking, is a complete text in itself, which hopefully underscores how powerful it is, how ingrained it is. And yes, I will be completely transparent here. There is data. It is packed with data. It is not the most sexiest book you are going to read this year. However, if data is your thing, then it is. Though it is a mix, because I really like to put myself in your shoes. I can sway between liking data, I don't want to do data, liking data, I don't want to read about it. However, as someone responsible for this work, entrenched with data almost on a daily basis, that doesn't mean I always want to read about it. So I really try to, I think, do my best in the best possible way to make it applicable, readable, viewable, attainable, accessible, all encompassing in that way, because it's that, and that is why the secrets to optimal coaching success paves the way. Because if you become familiar with the initial books, you're on a learning curve, which I have touched on previously, maybe not as extensively as now, because you are inadvertently learning the steps. You're inadvertently learning how to comprehend this data, how to get there, how we progressed from this text today, the secrets to optimal coaching success, to the more ingrained work of, for example, the science of elite performance, the What Is Your Game Missing series, which really is wrapped with a lot of data that showcases a significant number of players on the WTA and ATP tours, both, and why they are either progressing or why they have either regressed when we're looking at Grand Slam performances and their rankings. So there are specific correlations we look at, and yes, I am also responsible for uncovering. But that has allowed us to continue to progress and progress and progress to uncover even further how to develop a top 10 tennis ranking. And I think it's really important to note that this podcast, Beyond Top 10 Tennis, came about when this text was being written, and I can promise you one thing, that the title of this book was unknown. And I really have to thank, I think, each and every one of you who have been listening, tuning in, following, subscribing, all of the above, interacting. Thank you from the bottom of my heart, because unbeknownst to me, the title was right in front of me. And it's something I'd been talking with you over and over again. And the same with the power of the eighth key, realizing over the course of the last 6 to 12 months how powerful it really is. Because the eighth key is that extensive, but each of the 7 keys moves the market to the next level when paired with the eighth key. And I think that really wraps up, I think, the scientific rigor, in a manner of speaking, that's behind this. And hopefully today's topic that we're going to dive into now, just you can think a little bit deeper as we draw new insights out, because I can't stress enough how these initial texts really lay the foundations. And I'd really encourage you to read up on these initial texts to begin with, because it really sets the stage for what's to come. And you become more familiar progressively with the data, what the data means, how to interpret the data, what we're saying, where it's come from, the scientific, I think, and the statistical significance, what is significant, what is not significant, and how we really embarked on this journey, in a manner of speaking, because trust me, it was not planned. It was not planned 11 years ago. I thought it would be done and dusted. And then all of a sudden, I have spent a significant part of the last 8 years writing and publishing and getting this out for you. And when I say for you, I am explicitly talking to players, athletes out there who want to achieve a top 10 tennis ranking, explicitly to the parents and guardians out there who have a child and or children who want to achieve a top 10 tennis ranking, and explicitly to the coaches out there who are open-minded enough and want to know how to develop a top 10 tennis ranking. All right, without, I guess, further ado, today's topic is on learning through prior play. And if you want to follow along, we're on page 68. But today's topic, it's so important that we call the secrets to optimal performance success. So that has been significantly responsible for those initial first 50 episodes. So remember, the secrets to optimal coaching success is only the last 7 to 8 episodes. And we do have episodes in our catalog that touches on learning, but also prior play. Look for the sister factor and the interactions that you get from other sports, and how they can be incredibly profound to help your performance inadvertently, because we're also looking at conditioning behaviors, how those behaviors are conditioned, but then also in turn, when we're looking at performances, technical parameters, patterns of play, building that rhythm, heading towards, I think, that new baseline, that new standard, so that next peak performance, reaching those peak performance cycles, then the next peak performance cycle. So we've touched on that, the role of periodization. It's incredibly extensive today, which makes me very happy because I can shed more light on that. So if I'm saying something or sharing something now with you, you can refer back to those episodes to have a more thorough understanding, because you need to remember, in the very beginning, I did not have that luxury. I was very conscious that I knew I was setting the foundation, so the platform, so to speak, so we could again build off that. Hopefully you are seeing a commonality here of progressions for the player, the coach, parent, or guardian, but also from my perspective, how I need to be incredibly conscious of making sure what is shared is also progressive, because you may be top 800 in the world. You need to progress. Top 10, you are looking to progress. You could be that 12, 13-year-old at your local club academy looking at how to progress. So we're looking at, I think, universal progressions that really are applicable, because whatever you are working on, if you are that 12, 13-year-old, that top 10 tennis player can still work on that skill, but in a different context and or a more challenging environment, whether it is a specific skill, say your forehand ground stroke, or it is that level of frequency, that level of consistency, that level of application, that whether you are working on your control and or your pace. There are so many variables in play. And to make whatever you're working on that much more challenging is where you can use or leverage another sport that you are able to play with and obviously enjoy yourself doing, but to challenge your skill set. And because they're wonderful inadvertent learnings, and more often than not, you can apply those learnings back to tennis, back to your performances. And it is a very, I think, clever, fun way to look at progressing your performance again. All right, so if you want to follow along, we're on page 68. As players or athletes evolve and head deeper into their developmental years, skills that they have acquired prior to partaking in their sport of choice hold dividends for their current and future play. Simply put, through active free play, children acquire a variety of skills that the human body naturally has ingrained into its makeup. That is, there are transference skills that each individual is born with, but it is the responsibility of the parent to allow this free play to transpire. Some really simple examples here are maybe in primary school, elementary school, in your very younger formative years, you had a ball, whether it's a soccer ball, a basketball. So bear with me, a ball of that size. I'm very conscious that there are different connotations if you're in Australia of what a soccer ball to football is, and or if you are based in Europe to the States. So hopefully you're with me, a big ball that is akin to the size of a basketball. Now, you may have played what we term in Australia tunnel ball. You may have played zigzag, for example. You could have played dodgeball, hopefully with a much softer ball. These are inadvertent areas you are playing with. We have one also in Australia called bull rush. There are many others that don't always involve a ball, but we're looking at hand-eye interactions with potentially a ball that is larger than that tennis ball typically. But then again, maybe you played table tennis, or you did when you were younger, or maybe you still do. There are a variety of sports in this context we're looking at when we're developing those fundamental skills. And I really touch on table tennis because it's a lighter ball and a smaller bat there, but also you typically could be playing in your backyard, just goofing around, having a good time, hopefully many laughs and giggles along the way. And so, which means you are very inadvertent in that learning process. The same with basketball, you may be playing at that level of hand-eye coordination. Netball is another one. Even though you're not bouncing the ball, you are passing that ball and you're relying on that movement, specifically those pivots that you get to interact. Now look how that interchanges with your level of footwork on the tennis court. Tunnel ball is a very fun one, but it's really looking at, again, your hand-eye coordination in a manner of speaking, but then also your speed of movement. So there are so many variances in this way. So the best thing you can do is in those formative to developmental years is play and is enjoy yourself. And I did touch on this in one of our previous episodes and blog posts, is that at the end of the day, tennis is a sport, but it's something you play. And it's so important to remember it is meant to be playful, something that you do enjoy doing and you thrive when you're doing it. In order to catch a ball, first a child needs to learn how to clap their hands. By clapping your hands, you are developing fine motor skills whilst also developing spatial awareness, how far apart your hands are before the clap is heard. This skill alone provides a trajectory for countless other actions that are required in a multitude of sporting activities and sets a benchmark for the child to further develop. This is great. I absolutely love this. And I'll tell you why. That the notion of simply clapping your hands, if you cannot do that, it's okay. It's something you can work on. But I will roll with that most people listening, you can clap your hands. And if we do that, then we really want to challenge ourselves, say with the tennis ball, because this is beyond top 10 tennis, to throwing that ball with your non-dominant hand, whether that's your left or right hand, and then you close one eye and continue doing the same. Throw that ball against a wall with that non-dominant hand and keep catching it. Start with underarm and do 10. Then go overarm, start with 10. Interchange left and right, then left and right, then left and right. Really simple examples. Now, continue all of the above on one foot. Continue all of the above, then sitting on the ground. So continue all of the above on your tiptoes. There are so many simple and easy variances that you can control in your own environment, at home and on the tennis court. Because before you do all of these skills, let's introduce the tennis court and a partner, so over the net. Then we're going to introduce the racket. And you're going to, instead of be throwing the ball underarm, you're going to be hitting the ball with your racket underarm, using ideally that continental grip. Now, there are so many progressions again, but these can be inadvertently encouraged through gameplay. And I think there's a very huge mistake often at the more senior level with the developmental players. So we're looking at them at the end of or nearing the end of those initial 10 years of play, where these activities are no longer a part of their play. And I think they really need to be, because I have never come across a player athlete who does not enjoy goofing around on the tennis court with these type of games, these type of skills, being challenged in this way, whereas it's underscored by simply having fun and enjoying yourself. For instance, clapping can be seen as a form of prior play, whereas the action of clapping helps children play baseball or softball, for example, where you are required to catch a ball. Similarly, the sports of netball and basketball require its competitors to catch a ball, and in order to do so with a larger ball, spatial awareness is key. Now, this is really important, and I'd really encourage you to look up and listen to and or read the associated blog post of the sister sport interactions, because these are prime examples, whether it is baseball or softball, to clapping your hands. Now, we know the movement to hit, to make contact with that baseball is more challenging, say, to that softball for the junior player if you begin on, let's say, the T-ball stand. Now, I'm very conscious that it may not be called this universally. So what I'm trying to describe is when the ball is not coming to you, it is stationary in front of you on a stand waiting for you to hit, is an example. In tennis, you don't have that luxury. It is coming to you. But you can get very close with that your coach and or your friend or your parental guardian dropping the ball very close to your racket or waiting for it to drop a number of times. There are many progressions. If you're starting out 2, 3, 4 bounces, whatever it takes, it's just about getting that feel. But if you are the more advanced player, you can still challenge yourself and allow that 3, 4 bounce. I would probably really challenge you to do that and see how your game changes, because this is a little bit, I'm getting a bit sidetracked here. But this week, see if you can let the ball drop 3 to 4 times before you hit it. Obviously, this is applicable if at a slower pace. This is not, I don't think, applicable if you're hitting at full pace. That's not going to work. But let it drop 3 to 4 times and see what happens to your mechanics. That's a very big hint, because whatever happens with your mechanics, I can guarantee you it's going to be helpful long term. Okay. To develop everyday skills, from walking in a straight line to hopping on one leg, through to playing hopscotch or using a skipping rope in the playground, these type of playful activities have hidden motor skills and ultimately movement patterns ingrained in their very nature, which is really important, because these movement patterns are not typically, I think, discussed in the landscape, let's say, of tennis in those developmental years, in a really simplified way, when we're looking at gaining those core movement principles that allow us to move more functionally and more fluidly around the court. Over time, they obviously developed, but there are inadvertent activities that can allow the potentially uncoordinated player athlete to no longer feel uncoordinated. Because at the end of the day, to the players, athletes out there, if you are moving a certain way and it just feels awkward, you just do not feel okay, that's okay. It is not your fault. It means, to the coaches out there, let's take a step back. We need to think outside the box to make sure we're building a skill that player, that athlete, that they understand, but they're also comfortable with. So they're not looking at tripping over their own feet, in a manner of speaking. We need to simplify it. And that may be applicable for the 4-year-old, the 6-year-old, or potentially that 12, 13-year-old. And then when you're further advancing, it's still applicable for that 16, 17-year-old when they are learning a new skill. And it's still applicable for that 25, 26-year-old and onwards when we're tweaking that skill. It's so important to be mindful of those simplified approaches, taking that step back to allow that step forward, in a manner of speaking. And it's really important, I think, for the players and coaches out there to be conscious of this. For example, walking in a straight line transitions to running in a straight line and ultimately influences a player's or athlete's ability to perform directional changes in an array of sports that require the player or athlete to be agile. The skill of hopping on one leg is applicable in sports that require balance, which quite frankly is every sport. After all, we need to be balanced to maintain any given technique at any given time. And I really want to finish on that, because the notion of balance is so underrated. It is so important. And I think there's a very big common misconception that everyone has it, that it's really easy. But you need to work on it, which means most adults these days, if they are prompted to stand on one leg, most can do it, but not for that long. Some are going to be able to do it for 2 to 3 to 5 seconds, others for 10, others maybe for a few minutes. More exceptionally is you can obviously do that longer without a challenge. But there is a baseline again that you need to start and work your way up from that 2-3 seconds from your other foot, just on top of your primary foot, for example, opposed to up your leg on the side of your knee, as an example, or to the side of your calf. So again, it's noting those progressions. But I really like the example of walking to running, because it's incredibly simple. But it's also a way to catch the varying, I think, technical differences, because albeit to that they are very similar although different. You can catch whether there's too much weight on one leg over the other. You can catch if someone's head is bobbing up and down. You can catch, obviously, if one knee is lifting more than the other, from a very simplified standpoint. Now we're going to transfer that over to tennis again, so it's prior play. And of course, walking or running is does not typically constitute as play and or game play in this respect. So it's just a very simple example, because typically you are running in some way, shape or form through play. Obviously on the tennis court you are, but typically that is horizontally and or vertically. You're not just running in a straight line, in a manner of speaking, unless you do have that drop shot, but that's besides the point. So it's really looking at, I think, those key progressions and even those directional changes, and we're really looking at agility, how we can build this. And again, it's so important to be conscious of the developmental spectrum, where a player currently is at, where they are looking to head towards. So recall those peak performance cycles. It is not, as I'm sorry to tell you, it's not that next year or in 2 years you're going to have a top 10 tennis ranking if you are that 13, 14-year-old within your first decade of play. However, if you are on the cusp of the second decade of play and you are in your late teen years, it's possible. It is incredibly possible if you've been following the pathway, the long game, and ingraining obviously those 7 keys. And the 8th key is it gets you there in the best possible way. So when we're looking, I think, at the developmental spectrum, whether it is for the younger players or for the players within that second decade of play, recall that developmental still plays a role, irrespective of what level you're at, whether you're top 20 or you're top 20 in your local club and or academy. Because again, it comes down to those progressions, it comes down to those environmental factors and the changes. So recall, I think, from the beginning of, I think, today's episode, and just really joining the dots along the way. And that's, I think, where the 7 keys come in, where the 8th key will come in, and I'm so excited to be able to share that today. And look, if you're looking to follow the pathway and the long game towards that top 10 tennis ranking, then this is where the keys are absolutely fundamental and will nudge you closer and closer. You will progress closer and closer and closer towards that top 10 tennis ranking. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. I really hope you enjoyed it. We did get a little bit complicated, but we dived straight in today, and I almost forgot to shed more light on that humanized approach. It was very brief, but I also think today's episode, it was almost fully encompassed with that humanized approach without saying. And I hope if you've been listening for some time now, that was really familiar. If you have not been listening, so this is one of your first episodes, then please catch up on a couple so you can become familiar, I think, with that humanized approach, where we're going, where it's come from, just to, I think, paint a bigger, brighter picture in this respect. But I think, look, more so today, I was so excited, and I am, to be able to share the title, which is a given, How to Develop a Top 10 Tennis Ranking. I almost start every episode and finish almost every episode with it. I do try. And the power of the 8th key. I'm really excited to be able to share that, because the 8th key is incredibly powerful. And I can't wait to hear your thoughts, because at the end of the day, that top 10 tennis ranking, it really is achievable, attainable, and we now have that pathway here. And I'm really looking forward to you being able to get your hands on it and sharing, I think, where you're at, whether it's 800 in the world, 250 in the world, 15 in the world, to nudge you closer and closer towards that top 10 tennis ranking. And there are so many more insights in this book that I will begin to share now a little bit more over the next couple of weeks. To grab your copies of The Secrets to Optimal Coaching Success, head on over to AMA International. That is am8international.com. And when we have a specific release date set, it is coming. I will make sure everything's available on AMA International as well. So please do keep an eye out. For any comments or questions, head on over to AM8 International or Topic Thread, the social platform set on data privacy. To interact with Beyond Top 10 Tennis, head on over to Twitter, Threads, LinkedIn, or Instagram. To catch up on our weekly coaching tips, head on over to TikTok, or to catch up on our weekly blogs, head on over to Medium, or go to AMA International and look for our blogs tab, and you will see them all there. And as always, I will leave all the links in the episode notes. For something different, head on over to Pink Octopus Books. That's where my fictional release is. To view this week's question and poll, be sure to visit Spotify. Or for something left of field, visit Spruik for some random polls. And of course, if you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, like, share, and all of the above would be absolutely phenomenal. For those of you who are interested, we do have scholarships available on AMA International, as well as options to work with me exclusively to optimize your performance and to nudge you closer towards that top 10 tennis ranking. So don't be shy and come and say hi. On that note, thank you so much for listening. I am so incredibly grateful. Thank you so much. I am your host, Dr. Ashley Morgan Berge, and this is Beyond Top 10 Tennis. And I'll see you next time.